The illustrious SCULLERY-MAID by Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. In the famous city of Burgos, there lived two wealthy cavaliers, one of whom was called Don Diego de Carriazo, and the other Don Juan de Avendano. Don Diego had a son called after himself, and Don Juan another whose name was Don Tomas de Avendano. These two young gentlemen being the principal persons of the following tale, we shall for the sake of brevity call them Carriazo and Avendano. Carriazo might be about 13 or little more when prompted by a scampish disposition, without having had any cause to complain of bad treatment at home. He ran away from his father's house, and cast himself upon the wide world, so much did he enjoy a life of unrestricted freedom, that amidst all the wants and discomforts attendant upon it, he never missed the plenty of his father's house. He neither tired of trudging on foot, nor cared for cold or heat for him. All seasons of the year were genial spring, his sleep was as sound on a heap of straw, as on soft mattresses, and he made himself as snug in a hayloft, as between two holland sheets. In short, he made such way in the profession he had chosen that he could have given lessons to the famous Guzman de Alfarrake. During the 3 years he absented himself from home, he learned to play at sheepshanks in Madrid, at Renta, in the public houses of Toledo, and at Presa y Pinta in the barbacans of Seville. In spite of the sordid penury of his way of life, Carriazo showed himself a prince in his actions. It was easy to see by 1,000 tokens that he came of gentle blood. His generosity gained him the esteem of all his comrades. He seldom was present at drinking bouts, and though he drank wine it was in moderation, and he carried it well. He was not one of those unlucky drinkers, who whenever they exceed a little show it immediately in their faces, which look as if they were painted with vermilion, or red ochre. In short, the world beheld in Carriazo a virtuous, honorable, well-bred rogue, of more than common ability. He passed through all the degrees of roguery, till he graduated as a master in the tunny fisheries of Zahara, the chief school of the art o' kitchen walloping, rogues fat and shining with grease feigned, cripples cut purses of Zocodober, and of the plaza of Madrid sanctimonious patterers of prayers, Seville porters bullies of the Hampa, and all the countless host comprised under the denomination of rogues. Never presume to call yourself by that name, if you have not gone through 2 courses at least in the Academy of the Tunny Fisheries there. It is that you may see converging, as it were, in one grand focused toil, and idleness, filth, and spruceness sharp, set hunger, and lavish plenty vice. Without disguise incessant gambling, brawls, and quarrels, every hour in the day murders, every now and then ribaldry and obscenity, singing, dancing, laughing, swearing, cheating, and thieving. Without end there many a man of quality seeks for his truant son, nor seeks in vain. And the youth feels as acutely the pain of being torn from that life of license, as though he were going to meet his death. But this joyous life has its bitters as well as its sweets. No one can lie down to sleep securely in Zahara, but must always have the dread hanging over him of being carried off to Barbary at any moment. For this reason, they all withdraw at night into some fortified places on the coast and place scouts and sentinels to watch whilst they sleep. But in spite of all precautions, it has sometimes happened that scouts, sentinels, rogues, overseers, boats, nets, and all the posse comitatus of the place have begun the night in Spain, and have seen the dawn in Tetuan. No apprehensions of this kind, however, could deter Carriazo from spending 3 successive summers at the fisheries for his pastime, and such was his luck during his 3rd season that he won at cards about 700 reals, with which he resolved to buy himself good clothes, return to Burgos, and gladden the heart of his sorrowing mother. He took a most affectionate leave of his many dear friends, assuring them that nothing but sickness or death should prevent his being with them in the following summer, for his heart was in Zahara, and to his eyes its parched sands were fresher than all the verdure of the Elysian fields. Ambling merrily along on Shank's mare, he arrived at Valladolid, where he stopped a fortnight to get rid of the mahogany hue of his complexion, and to change his rogue's costume for that of a gentleman. Having equipped himself properly, he had still 100 reals left, which he spent on the hire of a mule and a servant, that he might make a good figure when he presented himself to his parents. They received him with the utmost joy, and all the friends and relations of the family came to congratulate them on the safe arrival of their son, Don Diego de Carriazo. I had forgotten to mention that during his peregrination, Don Diego had taken the name of Vidiales, and by that name alone he was known to his new acquaintances. Among those who came to see the new arrival were Don Juan de Avendano and his son Don Tomas, with the latter of whom, as they were both of the same age and neighbors, Carriazo contracted a very close friendship. Carriazo gave his parents a long and circumstantial account of all the fine things he had seen and done during the 3 years he had been from home, in all which there was not one word of truth. But he never so much as hinted at the tunny fisheries, though they were constantly in his thoughts more especially. As the time approached in which he had promised his friends he would return to them, he took no pleasure in the chase with which his father sought often to divert him, nor in any of the convivial meetings of that hospitable city. All kinds of amusements wearied him, and the best enjoyments that could be offered to him were not to be compared, he thought, with those he had known at the tunny fisheries. His friend Avendano, finding him often melancholy, and musing, ventured to inquire after the cause, at the same time professing his readiness to assist his friend in any way that might be requisite, and to the utmost of his power, even at the cost of his blood. Carriazo felt that it would be wronging the great friendship subsisting between him and Avendano if he concealed from the latter the cause of his present sadness, and therefore he described to him in detail the life he had led at Zahara, and declared that all his gloom arose from his strong desire to be there once more. So attractive was the picture he drew that Avendano, far from blaming his taste, expressed his entire sympathy with it. The end of the matter was that Avendano determined to go off with Carriazo and enjoy for one summer that delicious life of which he had just heard such a glowing description, and in this determination he was strongly encouraged to persist by Carriazo, who was glad to be so countenanced in his own low propensities. They set their wits to work to see how they could scrape together as much money as possible, and the best means that occurred to them was that suggested by Avendano's approaching departure for Salamanca, where he had already studied for 3 years, and where his father wished him to complete his education and take a degree in whatever faculty. He pleased. Carriazo now made known to his father that he had a strong desire to go with Avendano and study at Salamanca. Don Diego gladly fell in with his son's proposal. He talked with his friend Don Juan on the subject, and it was agreed between them that the two young men should reside together at Salamanca and be sent thither well supplied with all requisites, and in a manner suitable to the sons of men of quality. The time for their departure being arrived, they were furnished with money, and with a tutor who was more remarkable for integrity than for mother wit. Their fathers talked much and impressively to their sons about what they should do, and how they should govern themselves in order that they might become fraught with virtue and knowledge, for that is the fruit which every student should aspire to reap from his labors and his vigils, especially such as are of good family. The sons were all humility and obedience. Their mothers cried, both parents gave them their blessing, and away they went mounted on their own mules, and attended by 2 servants of their respective households, besides the tutor, who had let his beard grow to give him a more imposing air of gravity, as became his charge. When they arrived at Valladolid, they told their tutor they should like to remain there a couple of days to see the city, having never been in it, before the tutor severely reprimanded them for entertaining any such idle notion, telling them they had no time to lose in silly diversions, that their business was to get as fast as possible to the place where they were to pursue their studies, that he should be doing extreme violence to his conscience if he allowed them to stop for 1 hour, not to speak of 2 days, that they should continue their journey forthwith, or if not, then brown bread should be their portion. Such was the extent of the ability in his office possessed by this tutor or majordomo, as we should rather call him, the lads who had already gathered in their harvest, since they had laid hands upon 400 gold crowns, which were in the majordomo's keeping. Begged that he would let them remain in Valladolid for that day, only that they might see the grand aqueducts which were then in course of construction for the purpose of conveying the waters of Argos to that city. He consented at last, but with extreme reluctance, for he wished to avoid the expense of an additional day on the road, and to spend the night at Valdeastella's, whence he could easily reach Salamanca in 2 days. But the bay horse thinks one thing, and the man on his back another thing, and so it proved in the majordomo's case. The lads, mounted on 2 excellent mules, and attended by only 1 servant, rode out to see the fountain of Argos, famous for its antiquity and the abundance of its water. On their arrival there, Avendano gave the servant a sealed paper bidding him return forthwith to the city and deliver it to his tutor, after which the servant was to wait for them at the Puerta del Campo. The servant did as he was bid and went back to the city with the letter, and they, turning their mules' heads another way, slept that night in Majados, and arrived 2 days afterwards in Madrid, where they sold their mules. They dressed themselves like peasants in short jerkins, loose breeches, and grey stockings. An old clothes dealer, to whom they sold their handsome apparel in the morning, transformed them by night in such a manner that their own mothers would not have known them lightly equipped as suited their purpose, and without swords, for they had sold them to the old clothes dealer. They took to the road to Toledo there. Let us leave them for the present, stepping out briskly, with merry hearts, while we return to the tutor, and see him open the letter delivered to him by the servant, which he read as follows. Your worship, Señor Pedro Alonso, will be pleased to have patience, and go back to Burgos, where you will say to our parents that we their sons, having with mature deliberation considered how much more arms befit cavaliers than do letters, have determined to exchange Salamanca for Brussels and Spain for Flanders. We have got the 400 crowns, the mules we intend to sell, the course we have chosen, which is so worthy of persons of our quality, and the length of the journey before us, are sufficient to excuse our fault, though a fault it will not be deemed by anyone. But a coward our departure takes place, now our return will be, when it shall please God, to whose keeping we your humble pupils heartily commend you, given from the fountain of Argils, with one foot in the stirrup for Flanders. Carriazo Avendano. Aghast at the contents of this letter, Pedro Alonso hurried to his valise, and found that the paper spoke, but too truly, for the money was gone. Instantly mounting the remaining mule, he returned to Burgos to carry these tidings to his patrons, in order that they might take measures to recover possession of their sons' persons. But as to how he was received, the author of this tale says not a word, for the moment he has put Pedro Alonso into the saddle. He leaves him to give the following account of what occurred to Avendano and Carriazo at the entrance of Illescas. Just by the town gate they met two muleteers Andalusians, apparently one of whom was coming from Seville, and the other going thither. Said the latter to the former, if my masters were not so far ahead, I should like to stop a little longer to ask you 1,000 things. I want to know, for I am quite astonished at what you have told me about the Khans having hanged Alonso Gins and Ribra, without giving them leave to appeal. As I'm a sinner, replied the civilian, the Conde laid a trap for them, got them under his jurisdiction, for they were soldiers. And once having them in his gripe, the court of appeal could never get them out of it. I tell you what it is, friend, he has a devil within him, that same Conde de Punenrostro, Seville, and the whole country round it for 10 leagues is swept clear of swashbucklers, not a thief ventures within his limits. They all fear him like fire. It is whispered, however, that he will soon give up his place as corregidor, for he is tired of being at loggerheads at every hand's turn, with the senors of the court of appeal. May they live 1,000 years, exclaimed he who was going to Seville, for they are the fathers of the miserable, and a refuge for the unfortunate. How many poor fellows must eat dirt for no other reason than the anger of an arbitrary judge of a corregidor, either ill-informed or wrong-headed? Many eyes see more than two. The venom of injustice cannot so soon lay hold on many hearts as on one alone. You have turned preacher, said he of Seville, but I am afraid I can't stop to hear the end of your sermon. Don't put up tonight at your usual place, but go to the Posada del Sevillano, for there you will see the prettiest scullery wench I know. Marinilla at the Venta Tejada is a dishclout in comparison with her. I will only tell you that it is said the son of the corregidor is very sweet upon her. One of my masters, gone on ahead there, swears that, on his way back to Andalusia, he will stop 2 months in Toledo, and in that same inn only to have his fill of looking at her. I myself ventured once to give her a little bit of a squeeze, and all I got for it was a swinging box on the ear. She is as hard as a flint, as savage as a kestrel, and as touch-me-not as a nettle, but she has a face that does a body's eyes good to look at. She has the sun in one cheek and the moon in the other. The one is made of roses, and the other of carnations, and between them both are lilies and jessamine. I say no more, only see her for yourself, and you will see that all I have told you is nothing to what I might say of her beauty. I'd freely settle upon her those 2 silver-gray mules of mine, that you know, if they would let me have her for my wife. But I know they want, for she is a morsel for an archbishop, or a conde. Once more, I say go and see her, and so goodbye to you, for I must be off. The 2 muleteers went their several ways, leaving the 2 friends much struck by what they had overheard of the conversation, especially Avendano, in whom the mere relation which the muleteer had given of the scullery-maid's beauty awoke an intense desire to see her. It had the same effect on Carriazo, but not to an equal degree, nor so as to extinguish his desire to reach his beloved tunny fisheries, from which he would not willingly be delayed to behold the pyramids of Egypt or any or all of the other 7 wonders of the world. Repeating the dialogue between the muleteers and mimicking their tones and gestures served as pastime to beguile the way, until they reached Toledo. Carriazo, who had been there before, led the way at once to the Posada del Sevillano. But they did not venture to ask for accommodation there, their dress and appearance not being such as would have gained them a ready welcome. Night was coming on, and though Carriazo importuned Avendano to go with him in search of lodgings elsewhere, he could not prevail on him to quit the doors of the Sevillano, or cease from hanging about them upon the chance that the celebrated scullery-maid might perhaps make her appearance. When it was pitch dark, Carriazo was in despair, but still, Avendano stuck to the spot, and at last he went into the courtyard of the inn under pretence of inquiring after some gentlemen of Burgos, who were on their way to Seville. He had but just entered the courtyard when a girl who seemed to be about 15 and was dressed in working clothes came out of one of the side doors with a lighted candle. Avendano's eyes did not rest on the girl's dress, but on her face, which seemed to him such as a painter would give to the angels, and so overcome was he by her beauty that he could only gaze at it in speechless admiration, without being able to say one word for himself. "What may you please to want, brother?" said the girl. "Are you servant to one of the gentlemen in the house?" "I am no one's servant, but yours," replied Avendano, trembling with emotion. "Go to brother," returned the girl disdainfully. "We who are servants ourselves have no need of others to wait on us." And calling her master, she said, "Please to see, sir, what this lad wants." The master came out, and in reply to his question Avendano said that he was looking for some gentlemen of Burgos who were on their way to Seville. One of them was his master, and had sent him on before them to Alcala de Henares upon business of importance, bidding him, when that was done, to proceed to Toledo and wait for him at the Sevillano. And he believed that his master would arrive there that night or the following day at farthest. So plausibly did Avendano tell this fib that the landlord was quite taken in by it. "Very well, friend," said he, "you may stop here till your master comes." "Many thanks, senor landlord," replied Avendano, "and will your worship bid them give me a room for myself and a comrade of mine who is outside? We have got money to pay for it as well as another." "Certainly," said the host, and turning to the girl, he said, "Costanza, bid La Argello take these two gallants to the corner room and give them clean sheets." "I will do so, senor," and curtsying to her master, she went away, leaving Avendano by her departure in a state of feeling like that of the tired wayfarer when the sun sets, and he finds himself wrapped in cheerless darkness. He went, however, to give an account of what he had seen and done to Carriazo, who very soon perceived that his friend had been smitten in the heart, but he would not say a word about the matter then, until he should see whether there was a fair excuse for the hyperbolical praises with which Avendano exalted the beauty of Costanza above the stars. At last they went indoors, and La Argello, the chamber-maid, a woman of some 45 years of age, showed them a room which was neither a gentleman's nor a servant's, but something between the two. On their asking for supper, La Argello told them they did not provide meals in that inn, they only cooked and served up such food as the guests bought and fetched for themselves. But there were eating houses in the neighborhood where they might without scruple of conscience go and sup as they pleased. The two friends took La Argello's advice, and went to an eating house where Carriazo supped on what they set before him, and Avendano on what he had brought with him, to wit, thoughts and fancies. Carriazo noticed that his friend ate little or nothing, and by way of sounding him, he said on their way back to the inn, "We must be up betimes tomorrow morning, so that we may reach Orges before the heat of the day." "I am not disposed for that," replied Avendano, "for I intend, before I leave this city, to see all that is worth seeing in it, such as the cathedral, the waterworks of Juanillo, the view from the top of St. Augustine's, the King's Garden, and the promenade by the river." "Very well, we can see all that in 2 days. What need of such haste? We are not posting to Rome to ask for a vacant benefice." "Ha ha, friend, I see how it is. Ill be hanged if you are not more inclined to stay in Toledo than to continue our journey." "That's true, I confess it is as impossible for me to forego the sight of that girl's face as it is to get into heaven without good works." "Gallantly spoken, and as becomes a generous breast like yours. Here's a pretty story. Don Tomas de Avendano, son of the wealthy and noble cavalier Don Juan de Avendano, overhead and ears in love with the scullery-maid at the Posada del Sevillano. It strikes me I may answer you in the same strain. Here's Don Diego de Carriazo's son, and sole heir of the noble knight of Alcantara of the same name, a youth finely gifted alike in body and mind. And behold him in love with, whom do you suppose? With Queen Ginevra? No such thing, but with the tunny fisheries of Zahara, and all its rogues and rascalsa, more loathsome crew, I suspect, than ever beset St. Anthony in his temptations. You have given me tit for tat, friend, and slain me with my own weapon. Let us say no more now, but go to bed, and tomorrow, who knows, but we come to our senses. Look ye Carriazo, you have not yet seen Costanza. When you have seen her, I will give you leave to say what you like to me. Well, I know beforehand what will be the upshot of the matter. And that is, that I shall be off to my tunny fisheries, and you will remain with your scullery-maid. I shall not be so happy, nor I such a fool as to give up my own good purpose for the sake of your bad one. By this time, they reached the inn where the conversation was prolonged in the same tone half the night long after they had slept. As it seemed to them, little more than an hour they were awakened by the loud sound of clarions in the street. They sat up in bed, and after they had listened a while, ill lay a wager, said Carriazo, that it is already day, and that there is some feast or other in the convent of Nostra Senora del Carmen in this neighborhood, and that is why the clarions are pealing. That can't be, said Avendano. We have not been long asleep, it must be some time yet till dawn. While they were talking, someone knocked at the door and called out, young men, if you want to hear some fine music, go to the window of the next room, which looks on the street, it is not occupied. They got up and opened the door, but the person who had spoken was gone. The music still continuing, however, they went in their shirts, just as they were into the front room, where they found 3 or 4 other lodgers who made place for them at the window. And soon afterwards, an excellent voice sang a sonnet to the accompaniment of the harp. There was no need of anyone to tell Carriazo and Avendano that this music was intended for Costanza, for this was very clear from the words of the sonnet, which grated so horribly on Avendano's ears that he could have wished himself deaf rather than have heard it. The pangs of jealousy laid hold on him, and the worst of all was that he knew not who was his rival. But this was soon made known to him, when one of the persons at the window exclaimed, "What a simpleton is the corregidor's son, to make a practice of serenading a scullery-maid. It is true she is one of the most beautiful girls I have ever seen, and I have seen a great many, but that is no reason why he should court her so publicly." After all, said another, I have been told for certain that she makes no more account of him than if he never existed. I warrant she is this moment fast asleep behind her mistress' bed, without ever thinking of all this music. I can well believe it, said the first speaker, for she is the most virtuous girl I know, and it is marvelous that though she lives in a house like this, where there is so much traffic, and where there are newcomers every day, and though she goes about all the rooms, not the least thing in the world is known to her disparagement. Avendano began to breathe more freely after hearing this, and was able to listen to many fine things, which were sung to the accompaniment of various instruments, all being addressed to Costanza, who, as the stranger said, was fast asleep all the while. The musicians departed at the approach of Don Avendano, and Carriazo returned to their room, where one of them slept till morning. They then rose, both of them eager to see Costanza, but the one only from curiosity, the other from love. Both were gratified, for Costanza came out of her master's room looking so lovely that they both felt that all the praises bestowed on her by the muleteer fell immeasurably short of her deserts. She was dressed in a green bodice and petticoat, trimmed with the same color. A collar embroidered with black silk set off the alabaster whiteness of her neck. The thick tresses of her bright chestnut hair were bound up with white ribbon. She had pendants in her ears, which seemed to be pearls, but were only glass. Her girdle was a St. Francis cord, and a large bunch of keys hung at her side. When she came out of the room, she crossed herself and made a profound reverence with great devotion to an image of Our Lady that hung on one of the walls of the quadrangle. Then, looking up and seeing the 2 young men intently gazing on her, she immediately retired again into the room and called thence to Argello to get up. Carriazo, it must be owned, was much struck by Costanza's beauty. He admired it as much as his companion, only he did not fall in love with her. On the contrary, he had no desire to spend another night in the inn, but to set out at once for the fisheries. La Argello presently appeared in the gallery with 2 young women natives of Galicia, who were also servants in the inn, for the number employed in the Sevillano was considerable, that being one of the best and most frequented houses of its kind in Toledo. At the same time, the servants of the persons lodging in the inn began to assemble to receive oats for their master's beasts, and the host dealt them out, all the while grumbling and swearing at his maidservants, who had been the cause of his losing the services of a capital hostler, who did the work so well and kept such good reckoning, that he did not think he had ever lost the price of a grain of oats by him. Avendano, who heard all this, seized the opportunity at once. Don't fatigue yourself, Senor host, he said, give me the account book, and whilst I remain here I will give out the oats, and keep such an exact account of it that you will not miss the hostler who you say has left you. Truly, I thank you for the offer, my lad, said the host, for I have no time to attend to this business. I have too much to do both indoors and out of doors come down, and I will give you the book, and mind ye, these muleteers are the very devil, and will do you out of a peck of oats under your very nose, with no more conscience than if it was so much chaff. Avendano went down to the quadrangle, took the book, and began to serve out pecks of oats like water, and to note them down with such exactness that the landlord who stood watching him was greatly pleased with his performance. I wish to God, he said, your master would not come, and that you would make up your mind to stop with me. You would lose nothing by the change. Believe me, the hostler who has just quitted me came here 8 months ago all in tatters, and as lean as a shot herring, and now he has two very good suits of clothes, and is as fat as a dormouse. For you must know, my son, that in this house there are excellent veils to be got over and above the wages. If I should stop, replied Avendano, I should not stand out much for the matter of what I should gain, but should be content with very little for sake of being in this city, which they tell me is the best in Spain. At least it is one of the best and most plentiful, said the host, but we are in want of another thing too, and that is a man to fetch water, for the lad that used to attend to that job has also left me. He was a smart fellow, and with the help of a famous ass of mine, he used to keep all the tanks overflowing and make a lake of the house. One of the reasons why the muleteers like to bring their employers to my house is that they always find plenty of water in it for their beasts, instead of having to drive them down to the river. Carriazo, who had been listening to this dialogue, and who saw Avendano already installed in office, thought he would follow his example, well knowing how much it would gratify him out with the ass-center host. He said, I am your man, and will do your work as much to your satisfaction as my comrade. I indeed, said Avendano. My comrade Lopesturiano will fetch water like a prince. Ill go bail for him. La Argello, who had been all the while within earshot, here put in her word. And pray, my gentleman, said she to Avendano, who is to go bail for you? By my faith, you look to me as if you wanted someone to answer for you, instead of your answering for another. Hold your tongue, Argello, said her master. Don't put yourself forward, where you may not wanted. Ill go bail for them, both of them. And mind, I tell you that none of you women meddle, or make with the manservants, for it is through you they all leave me. So these two chaps are engaged, are they? Said another of the servant women. By my soul, if I had to keep them company, I would never trust them with the wine-bag. None of your jibes, Senora Gallagher, cried her master. Do your work, and don't meddle with the manservants, or ill baste you with a stick. Oh, to be sure, replied the Galician damsel, an't they dainty dears? To make a body's mouth water. I am sure master has never known me so frolicsome with the chaps in the house, nor yet out of it, that he should have such an opinion of me. The blackguards go away, when they take it into their heads, without our giving them any occasion. Very like, indeed, they're the right sort to be in need of anyone's putting them to bidding their masters an early good morning, when they least expect it. You've a deal to say for yourself, my friend, said the landlord. Shut your mouth and mind your business. While this colloquy was going on, Carriazo had harnessed the ass, jumped on his back, and set off to the river, leaving Avendano highly delighted at witnessing his jovial resolution. Here then we have Avendano and Carriazo changed, God save the mark, into Tomas Pedro, a hostler, and Lope Isturiano, a water carrier. Transformations surpassing those of the long-nosed poet. No sooner had La Argello heard that they were hired than she formed a design upon Isturiano, and marked him for her own, resolving to regale him in such a manner that if he was ever so shy she would make him as pliant as a glove. The prudish Galligan formed a similar design upon Avendano, and as the two women were great friends, being much together in their business by day and bedfellows at night, they at once confided their amorous purposes to each other, and that night they determined to begin the conquest of their two unimpassioned swains. Moreover, they agreed that they must in the first place beg them not to be jealous about anything they might see them do with their persons, for girls could hardly regale their friends within doors, unless they put those without under contribution. Hold your tongues, lads, said they, apostrophizing their absent lovers. Hold your tongues, and shut your eyes. Leave the timbrel in the hands that can play it, and let those lead the dance that know how, and no pair of cannons in this city will be better regaled than you will be by our two selves. While the Galligan and La Argello were settling matters in this way, our good friend Lope Isturiano was on his way to the river, musing upon his beloved tunny fisheries, and on his sudden change of condition. Whether it was for this reason or that fate ordained it, so it happened that, as he was riding down a steep and narrow lane, He ran against another water carrier's ass which was coming laden uphill, and as his own was fresh and lively, and in good condition, the poor half-starved, jaded brute that was toiling uphill was knocked down. The pitchers were broken, and the water spilled. The driver of the fallen ass, enraged by this disaster, immediately flew upon the offender, and pommeled him soundly before poor Lope well knew where he was at last. His senses were roused with a vengeance, and seizing his antagonist with both hands, by the throat he dashed him to the ground. That was not all, for unluckily, the man's head struck violently against a stone. The wound was frightful and bled so profusely that Lope thought he had killed him. Several other water carriers who were on their way too, and from the river seeing their comrade so maltreated seized Lope and held him fast, shouting, "Justice, justice, this water carrier has murdered a man," and all the while they beat and thumped him lustily. Others ran to the fallen man and found that his skull was cracked and that he was almost at the last gasp. The outcry spread all up the hill and to the Plaza del Carmen, where it reached the ears of an alguazil who flew to the spot with 2 police runners. They did not arrive a moment too soon, for they found Lope surrounded by more than a score of water carriers who were basting his ribs at such a rate that there was almost as much reason to fear for his life as that of the wounded man. The alguazil took him out of their hands, delivered him and his ass into those of his followers, had the wounded man laid like a sack upon his own ass, and marched them all off to prison, attended by such a crowd that they could hardly make way through the streets. The noise drew Tomas Pedro and his master to the door, and to their great surprise, they saw Asturiano led by in the gripe of 2 police runners with his face all bloody. The landlord immediately looked about for his ass, and saw it in the hands of another catchball, who had joined the alguazil's party. He inquired the cause of these captures, was told what had happened, and was sorely distressed on account of his ass, fearing that he should lose it or have to pay more for it than it was worth. Tomas followed his comrade, but could not speak a single word to him. Such was the throng round the prisoner, and the strictness of the catchpall's. Lope was thrust into a narrow cell in the prison with a doubly grated window, and the wounded man was taken to the infirmary, where the surgeon pronounced his case extremely dangerous. The alguazil took home the 2 asses with him, besides 5 pieces of 8, which had been found on Lope. Tomas returned greatly disconcerted to the inn, where he found the landlord in no better spirits than himself, and gave him an account of the condition in which he had left his comrade, the danger of the wounded man, and the fate of the ass to add to the misfortune. Said he, "I have just met a gentleman of Burgos, who tells me that my master will not now come this way in order to make more speed, and shorten his journey by 2 leagues. He has crossed the ferry at Aseca. He will sleep tonight at Orgaz, and has sent me 12 crowns with orders to meet him at Seville. But that cannot be, for it is not in reason that I should leave my friend and comrade in prison, and in such peril my master must excuse me for the present, and I know he will, for he is so good-natured that he will put up with a little inconvenience rather than that I should forsake my comrade. Will you do me the favor, senor, to take this money, and see what you can do in this business? While you are spending this, I will write to my master for more, telling him all that has happened, and I am sure he will send us enough to get us out of any scrape." The host opened his eyes a palm wide in glad surprise to find himself indemnified for the loss of his ass. He took the money and comforted Tomas, telling him that he could make interest with persons of great influence in Toledo, especially a nun, a relation of the corregidor's, who could do anything she pleased with him. Now the washerwoman of the convent in which the nun lived had a daughter who was very thick indeed, with the sister of a friar who was hand and glove with the said nun's confessor. All he had to do then was to get the washerwoman to ask her daughter to get the monk's sister to speak to her brother, to say a good word to the confessor, who would prevail on the nun to write a note to the corregidor, begging him to look into Lope's business. And then beyond a doubt they might expect to come off with flying colors, that is, provided the water carrier did not die of his wound, and provided also there was no lack of stuff to grease the palms of all the officers of justice, for unless they are well greased they creak worse than the wheels of a bullock cart. Whatever Tomas thought of this roundabout way of making interest, he failed not to thank the innkeeper, and to assure him that he was confident his master would readily send the requisite money. Argello, who had seen her new flame in the hands of the officers, ran directly to the prison with some dinner for him, but she was not permitted to see him. This was a great grief to her, but she did not lose her hopes for all that, after the lapse of a fortnight, the wounded man was out of danger, and in a week more the surgeon pronounced him cured. During this time, Tomas Pedro pretended to have had 50 crowns sent to him from Seville, and taking them out of his pocket, he presented them to the innkeeper, along with a fictitious letter from his master. It was nothing to the landlord whether the letter was genuine or not so. He gave himself no trouble to authenticate it. But he received the 50 good gold crowns with great glee. The end of the matter was that the wounded man was quieted with 6 ducats, and Asturiano was sentenced to the forfeiture of his ass, and a fine of 10 ducats with costs on the payment of which he was liberated. On his release from prison, Asturiano had no mind to go back to the Sevillano, but excused himself to his comrade on the ground that, during his confinement, he had been visited by Argello, who had pestered him with her fulsome advances, which were to him so sickening and insufferable, that he would rather be hanged than comply with the desires of so odious a jade. His intention was to buy an ass, and to do business as a water carrier on his own account, as long as they remained in Toledo. This would protect him from the risk of being arrested as a vagabond. Besides, it was a business he could carry on with great ease and satisfaction to himself, since with only one load of water, he could saunter about the city all day long looking at silly wenches. Looking at beautiful women, you mean, said his friend, for of all the cities in Spain, Toledo has the reputation of being that in which the women surpass all others, whether in beauty or conduct. If you doubt it, only look at Costanza, who could spare from her superfluity of loveliness charms enough to beautify the rest of the women not only of Toledo, but of the whole world. Gently, Senor Tomas, not so fast with your praises of the Senora Scullion, unless you wish that, besides thinking you a fool, I take you for a heretic into the bargain. Do you call Costanza a scullion? Brother Lope, God forgive you, and bring you to a true sense of your error. And is not she a scullion? I have yet to see her wash the first plate. What does that matter if you have seen her wash the second or the 50th? I tell you, brother, she does not wash dishes or do anything, but look after the business of the house, and take care of the plate, of which there is a great deal. How is it then that throughout the whole city they call her the illustrious scullery-maid? If so be she does not wash dishes, perhaps it is because she washes silver and not crockery that they give her that name. But to drop this subject, tell me, Tomas, how stand your hopes? In a state of perdition, for during the whole time you were in jail, I never have been able to say one word to her. It is true that to all that is said to her by the guests in the house, she makes no other reply than to cast down her eyes and keep her lips closed. Such is her virtue and modesty, so that her modesty excites my love no less than her beauty. But it is almost too much for my patience to think that the corregidor's son, who is an impetuous and somewhat licentious youth, is dying for her. A night seldom passes, but he serenades her, and that so openly that she is actually named in the songs sung in her praise. She never hears them, to be sure, nor ever quits her mistress' room from the time she retires until morning. But in spite of all that, my heart cannot escape being pierced by the keen shaft of jealousy. What do you intend to do, then, with this Portia, this Minerva, this new Penelope, who, under the form of a scullery-maid, has vanquished your heart? Her name is Costanza, not Portia. Minerva, or Penelope, that she is a servant in an inn, I cannot deny. But what can I do if, as it seems, the occult force of destiny and the deliberate choice of reason both impel me to adore her? Look you, friend, I cannot find words to tell you how love exalts and glorifies in my eyes this humble scullery-maid, as you call her, so that, though seeing her low condition I am blind to it, and knowing it I ignore it, try as I may, it is impossible for me to keep it long before my eyes, for that thought is at once obliterated by her beauty, her grace, her virtue, and modesty, which tell me that beneath that plebeian husk must be concealed some kernel of extraordinary worth. In short, be it what it may, I love her, and not with that commonplace love I have felt for others, but with a passion so pure that it knows no wish beyond that of serving her, and prevailing on her to love me in return in the like kind, what is due to my honorable affection. Here Lope gave a shout, and cried out in a declamatory tone, O platonic love, O illustrious scullery-maid, O thrice-blessed age of ours, wherein we see love renewing the marvels of the age of gold. O my poor tunnies, you must pass this year without a visit from your impassioned admirer. But next year be sure I will make amends, and you shall no longer find me a truant. I see, Asturiano, said Tomas, how openly you mock me. Why don't you go to your fisheries? There is nothing to hinder you. I will remain where I am, and you will find me here on your return, if you wish to take your share of the money. With you, take it at once, go your ways in peace, and let each of us follow the course prescribed to him by his own destiny. I thought you had more sense, said Lope. Don't you know that I was only joking? But now that I perceive you are in earnest, I will serve you in earnest in everything I can do to please you. Only one thing I entreat in return, for the many I intend to do, for you do not expose me to Argello's persecution, for I would rather lose your friendship than have to endure her's good God friend. Her tongue goes like the clapper of a mill, you can smell her breath a league, off all her front teeth are false. And it is my private opinion that she does not wear her own hair, but a wig to crown all, since she began to make overtures to me. She has taken to painting white till her face looks like nothing but a mask of plaster. True, indeed, my poor comrade, she is worse even than the Galligan who makes me suffer martyrdom. I'll tell you what you shall do, only stay this night in the inn. And tomorrow, you shall buy yourself an ass, find a lodging, and so secure yourself from the importunities of Argello, whilst I remain exposed to those of the Galligan, and to the fire of my Costanza's eyes. This being agreed on, the two friends returned to the inn, where Asturiano was received with great demonstrations of love by Argello. That night a great number of muleteers stopping in the house, and those near it got up a dance before the door of the Sevillano. Asturiano played the guitar, the female dancers were the two Galligans and Argello, and three girls from another in many persons, stood by, as spectators with their faces, muffled, prompted more by a desire to see Costanza than the dance, but they were disappointed, for she did not make her appearance. Asturiano played for the dancers with such spirit and precision of touch, that they all vowed he made the guitar speak. But just as he was doing his best accompanying the instrument with his voice, and the dancers were capering like mad, one of the muffled spectators cried out, "Stop, you drunken sot, hold your noise, wineskin, piperly poet, miserable catgut scraper." Several others followed up this insulting speech, with such a torrent of abuse that Lope thought it best to cease playing and singing. But the muleteers took the interruption so much amiss, that had it not been for the earnest endeavors of the landlord to appease them, there would have been a terrible row. In spite, indeed, of all he could do, the muleteers would not have kept their hands quiet, had not the watch happened just then to come up and clear the ground. A moment afterwards the ears of all who were awake in the quarter were greeted by an admirable voice, proceeding from a man who had seated himself on a stone opposite the door of the Sevillano. Everybody listened with rapt attention to his song, but none more so than Tomas Pedro, to whom every word sounded like a sentence of excommunication, for the romance ran thus. The last line was immediately followed by the flight of two brickbats which fell close to the singer's feet, but had they come in contact with his head, they would certainly have knocked all the music and poetry out of it. The poor frightened musician took to his heels with such speed that a greyhound could not have caught him. Unhappy fate of night-birds, to be always subject to such showers. All who had heard the voice of the fugitive admired it, but most of all Tomas Pedro. Only he would rather the words had not been addressed to Costanza. Although she had not heard one of them, the only person who found fault with the romance was a muleteer nicknamed Barabbas. As soon as this man saw the singer run off, he bawled after him, "There you go, you Judas of a troubadour. May the fleas eat your eyes out, who the devil taught you to sing to a scullery-maid about celestial realms and spheres and oceans, and to call her stars and suns, and all rest of it. If you had told her, she was as straight as asparagus, as white as milk, as modest as a laborer in his novitiate, more full of humors, and unmanageable than a hired mule, and harder than a lump of dry mortar, why then she would have understood you and been pleased. But your fine words are fitter for a scholar than for a scullery-maid. Truly, there are poets in the world who write songs that the devil himself could not understand. For my part, at least Barabbas, though I cannot make head or tail of what this fellow has been singing. What did he suppose Costanza could make of them? But she knows better than to listen to such stuff, for she is snug in bed, and cares no more for all these caterwaulers than she does for Prester John. This fellow, at least, is not one of the singers belonging to the corregidor's son, for they are out and out good ones, and a body can generally understand them. But by the Lord, this fellow sets me mad." The bystanders coincided in opinion with Barabbas, and thought his criticism very judicious. Everybody now went to bed. But no sooner was the house all still, than Lope heard someone calling very softly at his bedroom door. "Who's there?" said he. "It is we," whispered a voice, Argello. And the Galligan opened the door, and let us in, for we are dying of cold. "Dying of cold, indeed," said Lope, "and we are in the middle of the dog days." "Oh, leave off now, friend Lope," said the Galligan. "Get up and open the door, for here we are as fine as archduchesses." "Archduchesses, and at this hour? I don't believe a word of it, but rather think you must be witches, or something worse. Get out of that this moment, or by all that's damnable, if you make me get up, I'll leather you with my belt, till your hinder parts are as red as poppies." Finding that he answered them so roughly, and in a manner so contrary to their expectations, the two disappointed damsels returned sadly to their beds. But before they left the door, Argello put her lips to the keyhole, and hissed through it, "Honey was not made for the mouth of the ass." And with that, as if she had said something very bitter indeed, and taken adequate revenge on the scorner, she went off to her cheerless bed. Look you, Tomas, said Lope to his companion, as soon as they were gone set me to fight 2 giants, or to break the jaws of half a dozen or a whole dozen of lions, if it be requisite for your service. And I shall do it as readily as I would drink a glass of wine, but that you should put me under the necessity of encountering Argello, this is what I would never submit to know, not if I were to be flayed alive. Only think what damsels of Denmark 81 fate has thrown upon us this night. Well, patience, tomorrow will come, thank God, and then we shall see. I have already told you, friend, replied Tomas, that you may do as you please, either go on your pilgrimage, or buy an ass and turn water carrier, as you proposed. I stick to the water carrying business, said Lope. My mind is made up not to quit you at present. They then went to sleep till daylight. When they rose, Tomas Pedro went to give out oats, and Lope set off to the cattle market to buy an ass. Now it happened that Tomas had spent his leisure on holidays in composing some amorous verses, and had jotted them down in the book, in which he kept the account of the oats, intending to copy them out fairly, and then blot them out of the book or tear out the page. But before he had done, so he happened to go out one day and leave the book on the top of the oat bin. His master found it there, and looking into it to see how the account of the oats stood, he lighted upon the verses. Surprised and annoyed, he went off with them to his wife. But before he read them to her, he called Costanza into the room, and peremptorily commanded her to declare whether Tomas Pedro the hostler had overmade love to her, or addressed any improper language to her, or any that gave token of his being partial to her. Costanza vowed that Tomas had never yet spoken to her in any such way, nor ever given her reason to suppose that he had any bad thoughts towards her. Her master and mistress believed her, because they had always found her to speak the truth. Having dismissed her, the host turned to his wife, and said, I know not what to say of the matter. You must know, Senora, that Tomas has written in this book, in which he keeps the account of the oats verses, that give me an ugly suspicion that he is in love with Costanza. Let me see the verses, said the wife, and I'll tell you what we are to conclude. Oh, of course, as you are a poet, you will at once see into his thoughts. I am not a poet, but you well know that I am a woman of understanding, and that I can say the 4 prayers in Latin. You would do better to say them in plain Spanish. You know your uncle the priest has told you that you make no end of blunders when you patter your Latin, and that what you say is good for nothing. That was an arrow from his niece's quiver. She is jealous of seeing me take the Latin hours in hand, and make my way through them as easily as through a vineyard after the vintage. Well, have it your own way. Listen now, here are the verses, and he read some impassioned lines addressed to Costanza. Is there any more, said the landlady. No, but what do you think of these verses? In the first place, we must make sure that they are by Tomas. Of that there can be no manner of doubt, for the handwriting is most unquestionably the same as that in which the account of the oats is kept. Look ye, husband, it appears to me that, although Costanza is named in the verses, whence it may be supposed that they were made for her, we ought not for that reason to set the fact down for certain, just as if we had seen them written, for there are other Costanzas in the world besides ours. But even supposing they were meant for her, there is not a word in them that could do her discredit. Let us be on the watch, and look sharply after the girl, for if he is in love with her, we may be sure he will make more verses and try to give them to her. Would it not be better to get rid of all this bother by turning him out of doors? That is for you to do if you think proper, but really, by your own account, the lad does his work so well that it would go against one's conscience to turn him off upon such slight grounds. Very well, let us be on the watch, as you say, and time will tell us what we have to do. Here the conversation ended, and the landlord carried the book back to the place where he had found it. Tomas returned in great anxiety to look for his book, found it, and that it might not occasion him another fright, he immediately copied out the verses, effaced the original, and made up his mind to hazard a declaration to Costanza upon the first opportunity that should present itself. Her extreme reserve, however, was such that there seemed little likelihood of his finding such an opportunity. Besides, the great concourse of people in the house made it almost impossible that he should have any private conversation with her. To the despair of her unfortunate lover that day, however, it chanced that Costanza appeared with one cheek muffled, and told someone who asked her the reason that she was suffering from a violent face ache. Tomas, whose wits were sharpened by his passion, instantly saw how he might avail himself of that circumstance. Senora Costanza, he said, I will give you a prayer in writing which you have only to recite once or twice, and it will take away your pain forthwith. Give it me, if you please, said Costanza, and I will recite it, for I know how to read. It must be on condition, however, said Tomas, that you do not show it to anybody, for I value it highly, and I should not wish it to lose its charm by being made known to many. I promise you that no person shall see it, but let me have it at once, for I can hardly bear this pain. I will write it out from memory, and bring it you immediately. This was the very first conversation that had ever taken place between Tomas and Costanza during all the time he had been in the house, which was nearly a month. Tomas wrote out the prayer, and found means to deliver it unseen by anyone else into Costanza's hand. And she, with great eagerness and no less devotion, went with it into a room where she shut herself up alone. Then, opening the paper, she read as follows: Lady of my soul, I am a gentleman of Burgos, and if I survive my father, I shall inherit a property of 6,000 ducats, yearly income. Upon the fame of your beauty, which spreads far and wide, I left my native place, changed my dress, and came in the garb in which you see me to serve your master. If you would consent to be mine in the way, most accordant with your virtue, put me to any proof you please to convince you of my truth and sincerity. And when you have fully satisfied yourself in this respect, I will, if you consent, become your husband and the happiest of men. For the present, I only entreat you not to turn such loving and guileless feelings as mine into the street, for if your master, who has no conception of them, should come to know my aspirations, he would condemn me to exile from your presence, and that would be the same thing as sentencing me to death. Suffer me, Senora, to see you, until you believe me, considering that he does not deserve the rigorous punishment of being deprived of the sight of you, whose only fault has been that he adores you. You can reply to me with your eyes, unperceived by any of the numbers who are always gazing upon you, for your eyes are such that their anger kills, but their compassion gives new life. When Tomas saw that Costanza had gone away to read his letter, he remained with a palpitating heart, fearing and hoping either his death doom, or the one look that should bid him live presently. Costanza returned looking so beautiful in spite of her muffling, that if any extraneous cause could have heightened her loveliness, it might be supposed that her surprise at finding the contents of the paper, so widely different from what she had expected, had produced that effect. In her hand she held the paper torn into small pieces, and returning the fragments to Tomas, whose legs could hardly bear him up, Brother Tomas, she said, this prayer of yours seems to me to savor more of witchcraft and delusion than of piety. Therefore, I do not choose to put faith in it or to use it, and I have torn it up that it may not be seen by anyone more credulous than myself. Learn other prayers, for it is impossible that this one can ever do you any good. So saying, she returned to her mistress' room, leaving Tomas sorely distressed, but somewhat comforted at finding that his secret remained safe confined to Costanza's bosom, for as she had not divulged it to her master, he reckoned that at least he was in no danger of being turned out of doors. He considered also that in having taken the first step, he had overcome mountains of difficulties, for in great and doubtful enterprises, the chief difficulty is always in the beginning. Whilst these things were happening in the Posada, Asturiano was going about the market in search of an ass. He examined a great many, but did not find one to his mind, though a gypsy tried hard to force upon him one that moved briskly enough, but more from the effects of some quicksilver, which the vendor had put into the animal's ears, than from its natural spirit and nimbleness. But though the pace was good enough, Lope was not satisfied with the size, for he wanted an ass big and strong enough to carry himself, and the water vessels, whether they were full or empty. At last a young fellow came up and whispered in his ear, if you want a beast of the right sort for a water carrier's business, I have one close by in a meadow, a bigger or a better you will not find in Toledo. Take my advice, and never buy a gypsy's beast, for though they may seem sound and good, they are all shams and full of hidden defects. If you want to buy the real thing, come along with me, and shut your mouths. Lope consented, and away went the pair shoulder to shoulder, till they arrived at the King's Gardens, where they found several water carriers seated under the shade of a water wheel. Whilst their asses were grazing in an adjoining meadow, the vendor pointed out his ass, which took Lope's fancy immediately, and was praised by all present as a very strong animal, a good goer, and a capital feeder. The bargain was soon struck, and Lope gave 16 ducats for the ass with all its accoutrements. The bystanders congratulated him on his purchase, and on his entrance into the business, assuring him that he had bought an exceedingly lucky ass, for the man who had sold him had in less than a year, without overworking himself, made enough to buy 2 suits of clothes over and above his own keep, and that of the ass, and the 16 ducats with which he intended to return to his native place, where a marriage had been arranged with a half-kinswoman of his. Besides the water carriers who assisted at the sale of the ass, there was a group of 4 stretched on the ground, and playing at primer the earth, serving them for a table, and their cloaks for a table. Cloth Lope went up to watch their game, and saw that they played more like archdeacons than like water carriers, each of them having before him a pile of more than 100 reals in cuartos. And in silver, presently two of the players having lost all they had got up, whereupon the seller of the ass said that if there was a fourth hand he would play, but he did not like a three-handed game. Lope, who never liked to spoil sport, said that he would make a fourth. They sat down at once and went at it so roundly that in a few moments Lope lost 6 crowns which he had about him, and finding himself without coin said, if they liked to play for the ass he would stake him. The proposal was agreed to, and he staked 1/4 of the ass, saying they should play for him quarter by quarter. His luck was so bad that in 4 consecutive games he lost the 4/4 of his ass, and they were won by the very man who had sold him. The winner got up to take possession, but Lope stopped him, observing that he had only played for and lost the 4/4 of his ass, which the winner was welcome to take. But he must leave him the tail. This queer demand made all present shout with laughter, and some of them who were knowing in the law were of opinion that his claim was unreasonable. For when a sheep or any other beast is sold, the tail is never separated from the carcass, but goes as a matter of course with one of the hind quarters. To this Lope replied that in Barbary they always reckon 5/4 to a sheep, the tail making the fifth, and being reckoned as valuable as any of the other quarters. He admitted that when a beast was sold alive and not quartered, that the tail was included in the sale, but this was not to the point in question, for he had not sold his ass, but played it away, and it had never been his intention to stake the tail. Therefore he required them forthwith to give him up the same, with everything thereto annexed or pertaining, that is to say, the whole series of spinal bones from the back of the skull to where they ended in the tail, and to the tips of the lowest hairs thereof. Well said one, suppose it be as you say, and that your claim is allowed, leave the tail sticking to the rest of the ass, and hold on by it. No, said Lope, give me up the tail, or all the water carriers in the world shall never make me give up the ass. Don't imagine, because there are so many of you, that I will let you put any cheating tricks on me, for I am a man who can stand up to another man, and put 2 handbreadths of cold steel into his guts, without his being able to tell how he came by them. Moreover, I won't be paid in money for the tail at so much a pound, but I will have it in substance, and cut off from the ass as I have said. The winner of the 4/4 and the rest of the company began to think that it would not be advisable to resort to force in this business, for Lope seemed to them to be a man of such mettle that he would not be vanquished without some trouble, nor were they mistaken, for as became a man who had spent 3 seasons at the tunny fisheries, where all sorts of rows and brawls are familiar things, he rattled out a few of the most out-of-the-way oaths in vogue, there threw his cap into the air, whipped out a knife from beneath his cloak, and put himself into such a posture as struck the whole company with awe and respect. At last one of them, who seemed the most rational, induced the rest to agree that Lope should be allowed to stake the tail against a quarter of the ass at a game of quinola. So said, so done. Lope won the first game. The loser was piqued and staked another quarter, which went the way of the first, and in 2 more games the whole ass was gone. He then proposed to play for money. Lope was unwilling, but was so importuned on all hands that at last he consented, and such was his run of luck that he left his opponent without a maravedi. So intense was the loser's vexation that he rolled and writhed upon the ground, and knocked his head against it. Lope, however, like a good-natured liberal gentleman, raised him up, returned all the money he had won, including the 16 ducats, the price of the ass, and even divided what he had left among the bystanders. Great was the surprise of them all at this extraordinary liberality, and had they lived in the time of the great Tamerlane, they would have made him king of the water carriers. Accompanied by a great retinue, Lope returned to the city, where he related his adventure to Tomas, who in turn recounted to him his own partial success. There was no tavern or eating house or rogues gathering in which the play for the ass was not known, the dispute about the tail, and the high spirit and liberality of the Asturian. But as the mob are for the most part unjust and more prone to evil than to good, they thought nothing of the generosity and high mettle of the great Lope, but only of the tail, and he had scarcely been 2 days carrying water about the city before he found himself pointed at by people who cried, "There goes the man of the tail." The boys caught up the cry, and no sooner had Lope shown himself in any street than it rang from one end to the other with shouts of Asturiano. Give up the tail, give up the tail, Asturiano. At first Lope said not a word, thinking that his silence would tire out his persecutors. But in this he was mistaken, for the more he held his tongue the more the boys wagged theirs, till at last he lost patience, and getting off his ass began to drub the boys. But this was only cutting off the heads of Hydra, And for everyone he laid low by thrashing some boy, there sprang up on the instant not 7, but 700 more that began to pester him more and more for the tale. At last he found it expedient to retire to the lodgings he had taken apart from his companion, in order to avoid Argello, and to keep close there, until the influence of the malignant planet which then ruled the hours should have passed away, and the boys should have forgotten to ask him for the tale for 2 days. He never left the house, except by night to go and see Tomas, and ask him how he got on. Tomas told him that since he had given the paper to Costanza, he had never been able to speak a single word to her, and that she seemed to be more reserved than ever. Once he had found, as he thought, an opportunity to accost her. But before he could get out a word, she stopped him, saying, "Tomas, I am in no pain now, and therefore have no need of your words, or of your prayers. Be content that I do not accuse you to the Inquisition, and give yourself no further trouble." But she made this declaration without any expression of anger in her countenance. Lope then related how the boys annoyed him, calling after him for the tale, and Tomas advised him not to go abroad, at least with his ass, or if he did, that he should choose only the least frequented streets. If that was not enough, he had an unfailing remedy left, which was to get rid of his business, and with it of the uncivil demand to which it subjected him. Lope asked him, had the Galligan come again to his room? He said she had not, but that she persisted in trying to ingratiate herself with him by means of dainties, which she purloined out of what she cooked for the guests. After this conversation, Lope went back to his lodgings, intending not to leave them again for another 6 days, at least in company with his ass. It might be about 11 at night, when the corregidor most unexpectedly entered the Posado del Sevillano, at the head of a formidable posse. The host, and even the guests, were startled and agitated by his visit, for as comets when they appear always excite fears of disaster, just so the ministers of justice, when they suddenly enter a house, strike even guiltless consciences with alarm. The unwelcome visitor walked into a room and called for the master of the house, who came tremblingly to know what might be the senor corregidor's pleasure. "Are you the landlord?" said the magistrate with great gravity. "Yes, senor, and your worship's humble servant to command," was the reply. The corregidor then ordered that everyone else should quit the room and leave him alone with the landlord. This being done, he resumed his questions. "What servants have you in your inn, landlord?" "Senor, I have 2 Galligan wenches, a housekeeper, and a young man who gives out the oats and straw and keeps the reckoning." "No more?" "No, senor." "Then tell me, landlord, what has become of a girl who is said to be a servant in this house, and so beautiful that she is known all over the city as the illustrious scullery-maid? It has even reached my ears that my son Don Periquito is in love with her, and that not a night passes in which he does not serenade her." "Senor, it is true that this illustrious scullery-maid, as they call her, is in my house, but she neither is my servant nor ceases to be so." "I do not understand you. What do you mean by saying that she is, and is not your servant?" "It is the real truth, and if your worship will allow me, I will explain the matter to you and tell you what I have never told to anyone." "Before I hear what you have to say, I must first see this scullery-maid." Upon this, the landlord went to the door, and called to his wife to send in Costanza, when the landlady heard that she was in great dismay, and began to wring her hands, saying, "Lord, have mercy on me. What can the corregidor want with Costanza? And alone some terrible calamity must surely have happened, for this girl's beauty bewitches the men." "Don't be alarmed, senora," said Costanza. "I will go and see what the senor corregidor wants, and if anything bad has happened, be assured the fault is not mine." And without waiting to be called a second time, she took a lighted candle in a silver candlestick, and went into the room where the corregidor was. As soon as he saw her, he bade the landlord shut the door, and then taking the candle out of her hand, and holding it near her face, he stood gazing at her from head to foot. The blush which this called up into Costanza's cheeks made her look so beautiful, and so modest, that it seemed to the corregidor he beheld an angel descended on earth. After a long scrutiny, "Landlord," he said, "an inn is not fit setting for a jewel like this, and I now declare that my son Don Periquito has shown his good sense in fixing his affections so worthily. I say, damsel, that they may well call you not only illustrious, but most illustrious, but it should not be with the addition of scullery-maid, but with that of duchess." "She is no scullery-maid, senor," said the host. "Her only service in the house is to keep the keys of the plate, of which by God's bounty I have some quantity for the service of the honorable guests who come to this inn." "Be that as it may, landlord," returned the corregidor, "I say it is neither seemly nor proper that this damsel should live in an inn. Is she a relation of yours?" "She is neither my relation nor my servant, and if your worship would like to know Who she is your worship shall hear, when she is not present things, that will both please and surprise you. I should like to know it. Let Costanza retire, and be assured she may count on me in all things, as she would upon her own father for her great modesty and beauty oblige all who see her, to offer themselves for her service. Costanza replied not a word, but with great composure made a profound reverence to the corregidor. On leaving the room she found her mistress waiting in great agitation. She told her all that had passed, and how her master remained with the corregidor to tell some things. She knew not what which he did not choose her to hear. All this did not quite tranquilize the landlady, nor did she entirely recover her equanimity, until the corregidor went away, and she saw her husband safe and free. The latter, meanwhile, had told the corregidor the following tale. It is now by my reckoning center 15 years 1 month and 4 days, since there came to this house a lady dressed in the habit of a pilgrim, and carried in a litter. She was attended by 4 servant-men on horseback and 2 dunas, and a damsel who rode in a coach. She had also 2 sumpter mules richly caparisoned, and carrying a fine bed, and all the necessary implements for cooking. In short, the whole equipage was first rate, and the pilgrim had all the appearance of being some great lady, and though she seemed to be about 40 years of age, she was nevertheless beautiful in the extreme. She was in bad health, looked pale, and was so weary that she ordered her bed to be instantly made. And her servants made it in this very room. They asked me, who was the most famous physician in the city? I said, Dr. de la Fuente. They went for him instantly. He came without delay, saw his patient alone, and the result was that he ordered the bed to be made in some other part of the house, where the lady might not be disturbed by any noise, which was immediately done. None of the manservants entered the lady's apartment, but only the 2 dunas and the damsel my wife. And I asked the manservants who was this lady, what was her name, whence she came, and whither she was going, was she wife, widow, or maid, and why she wore that pilgrim's dress. To all these questions, which we repeated many and many a time, we got no other answer than that this pilgrim was a noble and wealthy lady of old Castile, that she was a widow, and had no children to inherit her wealth, and that having been for some months ill of the dropsy, she had made a vow to go on a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and that was the reason for the dress she wore. As for her name, they were under orders to call her nothing but the Lady Pilgrim. So much we learned then, but 3 days after one of the dunas called myself and my wife into the lady's presence, and there, with the door locked, and before her women, she addressed us with tears in her eyes, I believe, in these very words. Heaven is my witness, friends, that, without any fault of mine, I find myself in the cruel predicament which I shall now declare to you. I am pregnant, and so near my time that I already feel the pangs of travail. None of my manservants are aware of my misfortune, but from my women here I have neither been able nor desirous to conceal it to escape prying eyes in my own neighborhood, and that this hour might not come upon me, there, I made a vow to go to Our Lady of Guadalupe. But it is plainly her will that my labor should befall me in your house. It is now for you to succor and aid me with the secrecy due to one who commits her honor to your hands. In this purse there are 200 gold crowns, which I present to you as a first proof how grateful I shall be for the good offices I am sure you will render me. And taking from under her pillow a green silk purse embroidered with gold, she put it into the hands of my wife, who like a simpleton stood gaping at the lady, and did not say so much as a word in the way of thanks or acknowledgement. For my part, one remember that I said there was no need at all of, that we were not persons to be moved more by interest than by humanity to do a good deed. When the occasion offered, the lady then continued, you must immediately, my friends, look out for some place to which you may convey my child as soon as it is born. And also you must contrive some story to tell to the person in whose charge you will leave it. At first I wish the babe to remain in the city, and afterwards to be taken to a village. As for what is subsequently done, I will give you instructions on my return from Guadalupe, if it is God's will that I should live to complete my pilgrimage. For in the meantime, I shall have had leisure to consider what may be my best course. I shall have no need of a midwife. For, as I know from other confinements of mine, more honorable than this, I shall do well enough with the aid of my women, only, and thus I shall avoid having an additional witness to my misfortune. Here the poor distressed pilgrim ended what she had to say, and broke out into a flood of tears, but was partly composed by the soothing words spoken to her by my wife, who had recovered her wits. I immediately went in search of a woman to whom I might take the child when it was born, and between 12 and 1 o'clock, that night, when all the people in the house were fast asleep, the lady was delivered of the most beautiful little girl that eyes ever beheld, and the very same that your worship has just seen. But the wonder was that neither did the mother make any moan in her labor, nor did the baby cry, but all passed off quietly. And in all the silence that became this extraordinary case, the lady kept her bed for 6 days, during which the doctor was constant in his visits. Not that she had informed him of the cause of her illness, or that she took any of the medicines he prescribed, but she thought to blind her manservants by his visits, as she afterwards informed me, when she was out of danger on the 8th day. She left her bed apparently as big as she had been before her delivery, continued her pilgrimage, and returned in 3 weeks, looking almost quite well, for she had gradually reduced the bulk of her artificial dropsy. The little girl had been christened Costanza, in accordance with the order given me by her mother, and was already placed with a nurse in a village about 2 leagues hence, where she passed for my niece. The lady was pleased to express her satisfaction with all I had done, and gave me, when she was going away, a gold chain, which is now in my possession, from which she took off 6 links, telling me that they would be brought by the person who should come to claim the child. She also took a piece of white parchment, wrote upon it, and then cut zigzag through what she had written. Look, sir, here are my hands locked together, with the fingers interwoven. Now suppose your honor were to write across my fingers. It is easy to imagine that one could read the writing whilst the fingers were joined, but that the meaning would be lost as soon as the hands were separated, and would appear again as soon as they were united as before. Just so with the parchment. One half serves as a key to the other. When they are put together, the letters make sense, but separately they have no meaning. One half of the parchment, and the whole chain short of the 6 links, were left with me, and I keep them still, always expecting the arrival of the person who is to produce the counterparts. For the lady told me that in 2 years she would send for her daughter, charging me that I should have her brought up not as became her mother's quality, but as a simple villager. And if by any chance she was not able to send for the child so soon, I was on no account to acquaint her with the secret of her birth, even should she have arrived at years of discretion. The lady, moreover, begged me to excuse her, if she did not tell me who she was having, for the present important reasons, to conceal her name. Finally, after giving us 400 gold crowns more, and embracing my wife with tears, she departed, leaving us filled with admiration for her discretion, worth, beauty, and modesty. Costanza remained at nurse in the village for 2 years. At the end of that time, I brought her home, and have kept her ever since constantly with me, in the dress of a girl who had to work for her bread, as her mother directed. 15 years, 1 month, and 4 days. I have been looking for the person who should come and claim her, but the length of time that has elapsed makes me begin to lose all hope of his coming. If he does not make his appearance before this year is out, it is my determination to adopt her and bequeath her all I am worth, which is upwards of 16,000 ducats. Thanks be to God, it now remains for me, Senor Corregidor, to enumerate to you the virtues and good qualities of Costanza, if it be possible for me to express them. First and foremost, she is most piously devoted to Our Lady. She confesses and communicates every month. She can read and write. There's not a better lace maker in all Toledo. She sings without accompaniment like an angel. In the matter of behaving with propriety, she has not her equal. As for her beauty, your worship has seen it with your own eyes. Senor Don Pedro, your worship's son, has never exchanged a word with her in her life. It is true that from time to time he treats her to some music, which she never listens to. Many senors and men of title too have put up at this house, and have delayed their journey for several days solely to have their fill of looking at her. But I well know there is not one of them can boast with truth that she ever gave them opportunity to say one word to her, either alone or before folk. This senor is the real history of the illustrious scullery-maid, who is no scullion, in which I have not departed one tittle from the truth. The host had long ended his narrative before the corregidor broke silence. So much was he struck by the strange facts he had heard. At last he desired to see the parchment and the chain. The host produced them without delay, and they corresponded exactly to the description he had given of them. The chain was of curious workmanship, and on the parchment were written one under the other, on the projecting portions of the zigzag, the letters Titterio, which manifestly required to be joined with those of the counterpart. To make sense, the corregidor admired the ingenuity of the contrivance, and judged from the costliness of the chain that the pilgrim must have been a lady of great wealth. It was his intention to remove the lovely girl from the inn as soon as he had chosen a suitable convent for her abode, but for the present he contented himself with taking away the parchment, only desiring the innkeeper to inform him, if anyone came for Costanza, before he showed that person the chain which he left in his custody. And with this parting injunction, the corregidor left the house, much marveling at what he had seen and heard. Whilst all this affair was going on, Tomas was almost beside himself with agitation and alarm, and lost in 1,000 conjectures, every one of which he dismissed as improbable the moment it was formed. But when he saw the corregidor go away, leaving Costanza behind him, his spirits revived, and he began to recover his self-possession. He did not venture to question the landlord, nor did the latter say a word about what had passed between him and the corregidor to anybody, but his wife, who was greatly relieved thereby, and thanked God for her delivery out of a terrible fright. About 1 o'clock on the following day, there came to the inn 2 elderly cavaliers of venerable presence, attended by 4 servants on horseback, and 2 on foot, having inquired if that was the Posada del Sevillano. And being answered in the affirmative, they entered the gateway, and the 4 mounted servants dismounting, first helped their masters out of their saddles. Costanza came out to meet the newcomers with her wonted propriety of demeanor, and no sooner had one of the cavaliers set eyes on her than, turning to his companion, he said, "I believe, Senor Don Juan, we have already found the very thing we are come in quest of." Tomas, who had come as usual to take charge of the horses and mules, instantly recognized 2 of his father's servants a moment after he saw his father himself, and found that his companion was no other than the father of Carriazo. He instantly conjectured that they were both on their way to the tunny fisheries to look for himself and his friend. Someone, having no doubt told them that it was there, and not in Flanders, they would find their sons. Not daring to appear before his father in the garb he wore, he made a bold venture, passed by the party with his hand before his face, and went to look for Costanza, whom by great good luck he found alone. Then hurriedly, and with a tremulous voice, dreading lest she would not give him time to say a word to her, Costanza, he said, "One of those 2 elderly cavaliers is my father, that one, whom you will hear called Don Juan de Avendano. Inquire of his servants, if he has a son Don Tomas de Avendano by name, and that is myself. Thence you may go on to make such other inquiries as will satisfy you that I have told you the truth respecting my quality, and that I will keep my word with regard to every offer I have made you. And now farewell, for I will not return to this house until they have left it." Costanza made him no reply, nor did he wait for any, but hurrying out with his face concealed, as he had come in, he went to acquaint Carriazo that their fathers had arrived at the Sevillano. The landlord called for Tomas to give out oats, but no Tomas appearing, he had to do it himself. Meanwhile, one of the 2 cavaliers called one of the Galligan wenches aside, and asked her what was the name of the beautiful girl he had seen, and was she a relation of the landlord, or the landlady? "The girl's name is Costanza," replied the Galligan. "She is no relation either to the landlord or the landlady, nor do I know what she is. All I can say is, I wish the Murrin had her, for I don't know what there is about her, that she does not leave one of us girls in the house a single chance. For all we have our own features too, such as God made them. Nobody enters these doors, but the first thing he does is to ask, 'Who is that beautiful girl?' and the next is to say all sorts of flattering things of her, while nobody condescends to say a word to the rest of us, not so much as 'What are you doing here, devils or women, or whatever you are?' From your account, then," said the gentleman, "I suppose she has a fine time of it with the strangers who put up at this house. You think so well, just you hold her foot for the shoeing, and see how y'all like the job. By the Lord Senor, if she would only give her admirers leave to look at her, she might roll in gold, but she's more touchmanot than a hedgehog. She's a devourer of Ave Marias, and spends the whole day at her needle, and her prayers. I wish I was as sure of a good legacy as she is of working miracles some day. Bless you, she's a downright saint. My mistress says she wears haircloth next her skin." Highly delighted with what he had heard from the Galligan, the gentleman did not wait till they had taken off his spurs, but called for the landlord, and withdrew with him into a private room. "Senor host," said he, "I am come to redeem a pledge of mine which has been in your hands for some years, and I bring you for it 1,000 gold crowns, these links of a chain, and this parchment." The host instantly recognized the links and the parchment, and highly delighted with the promise of the 1,000 crowns, replied, "Senor, the pledge you wish to redeem is in this house, but not the chain or the parchment, which is to prove the truth of your claim. I pray you therefore to have patience, and I will return immediately." So saying, he ran off to inform the corregidor of what was happening. The corregidor, who had just done dinner, mounted his horse without delay, and rode to the Posada del Sevillano, taking with him the tally parchment. No sooner had he entered the room where the 2 cavaliers sat than, hastening with open arms to embrace one of them, "Bless my soul, my good cousin Don Juan de Avendano. This is indeed a welcome surprise." "I am delighted to see you, my good cousin," said Don Juan, "and to find you as well as I always wished you. Embrace this gentleman, cousin. This is Don Diego de Carriazo, a great senor and my friend." "I am already acquainted with the senor Don Diego," replied the corregidor, "and am his most obedient servant." After a further interchange of civilities, they passed into another room, where they remained alone with the innkeeper, who said, as he produced the chain, the señor corregidor knows what you are come for, Don Diego de Carriazo. Be pleased to produce the links that are wanting to this chain. His worship will show the parchment which he holds. And let us come to the proof for which I have been so long waiting. It appears, then said Don Diego, that it will not be necessary to explain to the señor corregidor the reason of our coming, since you have done so already, señor landlord. He told me something, said the corregidor, but he has left much untold, which I long to know. Here is the parchment. Don Diego produced that which he had brought. The two were put together, and found to fit accurately into each other, and between every two letters of the innkeeper's portion, which as we have said were titterio, there now appeared one of the following series, HSSH tucken, the whole making together the words. This is the true token. The 6 links of the chain brought by Don Diego were then compared with the larger fragment, and found to correspond exactly. So far all is clear, said the corregidor. It now remains for us to discover, if it be possible, who are the parents of this very beautiful lady. Her father, said Don Diego, you see in me her mother is not living, and you must be content with knowing that she was a lady of such rank that I might have been her servant. But though I conceal her name, I would not have you suppose that she was in any wise culpable, however manifest. And avowed her fault may appear to have been the story I will now briefly relate to you, will completely exonerate her memory. You must know then that Costanza's mother, being left a widow by a man of high rank, retired to an estate of hers, where she lived a calm sequestered life among her servants and vassals. It chanced one day, when I was hunting, that I found myself very near her house and determined to pay her a visit. It was siesta time, when I arrived at her palace, for I can call it nothing else. Giving my horse to one of my servants, I entered, and saw no one till I was in the very room in which she lay asleep on a black ottoman. She was extremely handsome. The silence, the loneliness of the place, and the opportunity awakened my guilty desires. And without pausing to reflect, I locked the door, woke her, and holding her firmly in my grasp, said, no cries, Senora, they would only serve to proclaim your dishonor. No one has seen me enter this room, for by good fortune, all your servants are fast asleep. And should your cries bring them hither, they can do no more than kill me in your very arms. And if they do, your reputation will not be the less blighted for all that. In fine, I effected my purpose against her will and by main force, and left her so stupefied by the calamity that had befallen her that she either could not or would not utter one word to me. Quitting the place, as I had entered it, I rode to the house of one of my friends, who resided within 2 leagues of my victim's abode. The lady subsequently removed to another residence, and 2 years passed without my seeing her, or making any attempt to do so. At the end of that time, I heard that she was dead. About 3 weeks since, I received a letter from a man who had been the deceased lady's steward, earnestly entreating me to come to him, as he had something to communicate to me, which deeply concerned my happiness and honor. I went to him, very far from dreaming of any such thing as I was about to hear from him, and found him at the point of death. He told me in brief terms that his lady on her deathbed had made known to him what had happened between her and me, how she had become pregnant, had made a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Guadalupe to conceal her misfortune, and had been delivered in this inn of a daughter named Costanza. The man gave me the tokens upon which she was to be delivered to me, namely the piece of chain and the parchment, and with them 30,000 gold crowns, which the lady had left as a marriage portion for her daughter. At the same time, he told me that it was the temptation to appropriate that money, which had so long prevented him from obeying the dying behest of his mistress. But now that he was about to be called to the great account, he was eager to relieve his conscience by giving me up the money, and putting me in the way to find my daughter returning home with the money and the tokens. I related the whole story to Don Juan de Avendano, and he has been kind enough to accompany me to this city. Don Diego had but just finished his narrative, when someone was heard shouting at the street door, tell Tomas Pedro the hostler that they are taking his friend the Asturiano to prison. On hearing this, the corregidor immediately sent orders to the alguazil to bring in his prisoner, which was forthwith done. In came the Asturian. With his mouth all bloody, he had evidently been very roughly handled, and was held with no tender grasp by the alguazil. The moment he entered the room, he was thunderstruck at beholding his own father and Avendano's, and to escape recognition, he covered his face with a handkerchief under pretense of wiping away the blood. The corregidor inquired what that young man had done, who appeared to have been so roughly handed. The alguazil replied that he was a water carrier known by the name of the Asturian, and the boys in the street used to shout after him, "Give up the tail, Asturiano, give up the tail." The alguazil then related the story out of which that cry had grown, whereat all present laughed. Not a little the alguazil further stated that, as the Asturian was going out at the Puerta de Alcantara, the boys who followed him, having redoubled their cries about the tale, he dismounted from his ass, laid about them all, and left one of them half dead, with the beating he had given him. Thereupon the officer proceeded to arrest him. He resisted, and that was how he came to be in the state in which he then appeared. The corregidor ordered the prisoner to uncover his face. But as he delayed to do so, the alguazil snatched away the handkerchief. "My son, Don Diego," cried the astonished father, "what is the meaning of all this? How came you in that dress? What, you have not yet left off your scampish tricks?" Carriazo fell on his knees before his father, who with tears in his eyes held him long in his embrace. Don Juan de Avendano, knowing that his son had accompanied Carriazo, asked the latter where he was, and received for answer the news that Don Tomas de Avendano was the person who gave out the oats and straw in that inn. This new revelation made by the Asturiano put the climax to the surprises of the day. The corregidor desired the innkeeper to bring in his hostler. "I believe he is not in the house, but I will go look for him," said he, and he left the room for that purpose. Don Diego asked Carriazo what was the meaning of these metamorphoses, and what had induced him to turn water carrier, and Don Tomas Hostler Carriazo replied that he could not answer these questions in public, but he would do so in private. Meanwhile, Tomas Pedro lay hid in his room in order to see thence, without being himself seen, what his father and Carriazo's were doing. But he was in great perplexity about the arrival of the corregidor and the general commotion in the inn. At last, someone having told the landlord where he was hidden, he went and tried half by fair means and half by force to bring him down, but he would not have succeeded, had not the corregidor himself gone out into the yard and called him by his own name, saying, "Come down, senor kinsman, you will find neither bears nor lions in your way." Tomas then left his hiding place, and went and knelt with downcast eyes and great submission at the feet of his father, who embraced him with a joy surpassing that of the prodigal's father when the son who had been lost was found again. The corregidor sent for Costanza, and taking her by the hand presented her to her father, saying, "Receive, Senor Don Diego, this treasure, and esteem it the richest you could desire, and you beautiful maiden, kiss your father's hand, and give thanks to heaven which has so happily exalted your low estate." Costanza, who till that moment had not even guessed at what was occurring, could only fall at her father's feet, all trembling with emotion, clasp his hands in hers, and cover them with kisses and tears. Meanwhile, the corregidor had been urgent with his cousin Don Juan that the whole party should come with him to his house, and though Don Juan would have declined the invitation, the corregidor was so pressing that he carried his point, and the whole party got into his coach, which he had previously sent for. But when the corregidor bade Costanza take her place in it, her heart sank within her. She threw herself into the landlady's arms, and wept so piteously that the hearts of all the beholders were moved. "What is this, daughter of my soul?" said the hostess, "going to leave me? Can you part from her, who has reared you with the love of a mother?" Costanza was no less averse to the separation, but the tender-hearted corregidor declared that the hostess also should enter the coach, and that she should not be parted from her, whom she regarded as a daughter, as long as she remained in Toledo. So the whole party, including the hostess, set out together for the corregidor's house, where they were well received by his noble lady. After they had enjoyed a sumptuous repast, Carriazo related to his father how, for love of Costanza, Don Tomas had taken service as hostler in the inn, and how his devotion to her was such that, before he knew her to be a lady, and the daughter of a man of such quality, he would gladly have married her, even as a scullery-maid. The wife of the corregidor immediately made Costanza put on clothes belonging to a daughter of hers of the same age and figure, and if she had been beautiful in the dress of a working girl, she seemed heavenly in that of a lady, and she wore it with such ease and grace that one would have supposed she had never been used to any other kind of costume from her birth. But among so many who rejoiced, there was one person who was full of sadness, and that was Don Pedro, the corregidor's son, who at once concluded that Costanza was not to be his, nor was he mistaken, for it was arranged between the corregidor Don Diego de Carriazo and Don Juan de Avendano that Don Tomas should marry Costanza, her father, bestowing upon her the 30,000 crowns left by her mother, that the water carrier Don Diego de Carriazo should marry the daughter of the corregidor, and that Don Pedro, the corregidor's son, should receive the hand of Don Juan de Avendano's daughter, his father. Undertaking to obtain a dispensation with regard to their relationship in this manner, all were finally made happy. The news of the 3 marriages, and of the singular fortune of the illustrious scullery-maid, spread through the city, and multitudes flocked to see Costanza in her new garb as a lady, which became her so well. These persons saw the hostler Tomas Pedro changed into Don Tomas de Avendano, and dressed as a man of quality. They observed, too, that Lope Asturiano looked very much the gentleman since he had changed his costume, and dismissed the ass and the water vessels. Nevertheless, there were not wanting some who, as he passed through the streets in all his pomp, still called out to him for the tale. After remaining a month in Toledo, most of the party went to Burgos, namely, Don Diego de Carriazo, his wife and his father Costanza, and her husband Don Tomas, and the corregidor's son, who desired to visit his kinswoman and destined bride. The host was enriched by the present of the 1,000 crowns, and by the many jewels which Costanza bestowed upon her senora, as she persisted in calling her who had brought her up. The story of the illustrious scullery-maid afforded the poets of the Golden Tagus a theme on which to exercise their pens in celebrating the incomparable beauty of Costanza, who still lives happily with her faithful hostler Carriazo, has 3 sons who, without inheriting their father's tastes, or caring to know whether or not there are any such things as tunny fisheries in the world, are all pursuing their studies at Salamanca, whilst their father never sees a water-carrier's ass, but he thinks of the one he drove in Toledo, and is not without apprehension that, when he least expects it, his ears shall be saluted with some squib having for its burden, "Give us the tale, Asturiano, Asturiano, give us the tale."